Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jim Knotts, President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, and I'll be your Master of Ceremonies for today's event. It's my pleasure to be the first to welcome you to the annual Veterans Day ceremony at the Wall. It's always great to see so many people who are able to be here in person, and I would note that we have thousands who are also watching the ceremony online today, and I would like to say welcome to you all. Before we begin, I would like to just say hello and my appreciation for attending to a couple of folks. First and foremost, Brigadier General George Price, longtime friend of mine and one of my favorite people in the whole world, able to be here today. I think maybe General Price has missed 2 Memorial Day or Veterans Day events since the wall was dedicated. So it's always a pleasure to have him here. And you know, those of us who have worn the uniform of our nation, we've all earned medals or awards or citations for doing great things. Those are all the grist for our bar stool stories that we tell for the rest of our lives. But in the military, we have heroes too. And those tend to be people who have earned the Medal of Honor or who have spent time serving their country in captivity. And we actually have one Vietnam-era prisoner of war who is here with us today. Colonel Brazelton, thank you for attending. Today, we will commemorate 2 special anniversaries. This year marks the 40th anniversary of the dedication of the 3 Servicemen statue and the 20th anniversary of the In Memory plaque. And as we begin our formal program, I want to recognize all of the Gold Star family members who are here with us today. Our Gold Star family members are the mothers, fathers, wives, sons and daughters, siblings, nieces and nephews, all those who experienced the loss of a loved one and who know all too well the sacrifices that our military families make. And finally, to those still waiting for a full accounting of their loved ones, thank you for joining us today. I'd like to take a moment to thank all of the Wall volunteers and the staff of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund for all they do year-round to honor veterans and preserve this memorial. You see folks in yellow shirts and yellow baseball caps scattered throughout the audience, and you'll see them at the wall later. Those are volunteers for the National Park Service. The Memorial Fund, as a nonprofit organization, we work very closely with them, but they really are the face of this memorial to almost 5 million visitors each and every year. Not only helping people find names, but telling stories, helping people understand, and I think most important of all, every now and then reaching over to give a great big hug. So we thank them for their service. As we begin our program today, I call your attention to the POW MIA chair, which occupies a place of dignity and honor on our stage. Let us always remember and never forget their sacrifices as we continue to work toward the fullest possible accounting of our missing. And since today is Veterans Day, I would like to ask all of our veterans in our audience, as you were able, to please stand and be recognized. Today is your day. On behalf of VVMF, I would like to thank you for your service, and to our Vietnam veterans, welcome home. And now please welcome William Horton, our chaplain for today, who will lead us in the invocation.
Would you join me in a word of prayer? Almighty God, we come before you today with thanksgiving in our hearts as we honor America's sons and daughters, those who have served in the preservation of our freedoms. We will always reflect on their heroic efforts and stories and we will never forget their patriotism, their commitment, and sacrifice. Our brothers and sisters who served in the Vietnam War answered our nation's call in a time of crisis, and many laid down their lives for the love of you and for our nation. You've taught us that greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. And anchored in that holy truth, we pray that each day as a nation we will not compromise your holy word when faced with the forces of evil. Refresh the hearts of our citizens and our allies and all our veterans and their families with the faith and the strength necessary to respond with similar courage as the heroes we honor here today. Strengthen the leaders of our great republic and our partnered nation states with the values of integrity, honesty, and the purity of heart to defend and preserve the dignity and freedom of all people. Continue to bless us with service members empowered by their faith to you and a deep devotion to our nation. Bless this ceremony, those who made it happen today, and those who share in honoring our veterans, both past and present. Bless our military, our allies, our families, and especially those deployed worldwide, even at this very moment, in defense of our freedom and democracy. And God, would you bless America? In your precious and holy name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. And now, as you're able, please stand as the Joint Armed Forces Color Guard from the Military District of Washington presents the colors. Color Guard, present the colors. As the colors come forward, singing our national anthem, we're pleased to have with us here today Staff Sergeant Ian Kelly of the United States Army Chorus. He will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Ms. Lindy Hart, here with us today on behalf of her husband, the late Frederick Hart, sculptor of the Three Servicemen statue. Please remain standing after the Pledge of Allegiance as the Color Guard retires the colors.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, right shoulder, oh.
Color Guard, retire the colors.
Color, turn, march.
Please be seated. Thank you to the Color Guard, Staff Sergeant Kelly, and Mrs. Hart. And now I'd like to introduce our partner in today's ceremony. Each year, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund hosts this ceremony in partnership with the National Park Service. Please welcome Jeff Reinbold, Superintendent of the National Mall and Memorial Parks.
Thanks, Jim. Good afternoon. On behalf of the National Park Service, it is my great honor to welcome you to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial on this Veterans Day as we acknowledge the service and sacrifice of those who served during the Vietnam War. To our Vietnam veterans, we're humbled by your presence. We thank you for your service, and we acknowledge the sacrifices you made, sacrifices that for too long went unrecognized by many. Know that today and every day, you are seen, you are honored, you are appreciated. As we gather today, we are reminded that Memorial is a place of reflection, not just for those who served in Vietnam, but for their families and for the millions of Americans who are forever connected to this war. As Jim mentioned, we also mark two important milestones today: the 40th anniversary of the three Servicemen statue and the 20th anniversary of the In Memory plaque. The three Servicemen statue, unveiled on Veterans Day in 1984, stands as a tribute to the men who served on the ground in Vietnam, the soldiers, the sailors, the airmen, the Marines, whose experiences are reflected in the expressions of the figures. This statue is a poignant reminder of the human cost of war. In addition, we commemorate the 20th anniversary of the In Memory plaque, which was dedicated in 2004 to honor the many Vietnam veterans who, though not listed on the wall, died as a result of their service in Vietnam. The In Memory plaque acknowledges that the impact of the war did not end when the soldiers returned home. It recognizes that lives lost after the war, those who died from both the physical and psychological toll of combat. Today we pay tribute to all of them. Their names, too, are etched in our nation's collective memory. I've had the honor to represent the National Park Service at these ceremonies over the last 5 years. I found the ceremonies at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial to be particularly poignant. I want to recognize the tremendous contributions of Jim Knotts and VVMF staff. They have played a critical role in not only organizing these programs, but making sure they are reflective, emotional, often thought-provoking, but also they assist us in preserving this site and ensuring it remains a living tribute to those who served in Vietnam. Jim, I also appreciate the commitment you've made over the last 5 years to strengthen our partnership for the good of this memorial and the memory of those we honor. I would also like to extend a heartfelt thank you to the National Park Service team here at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, the park rangers, the maintenance team, as Jim mentioned, volunteers in the yellow hats, our contractors, all of those who work diligently to maintain this sacred site. As we reflect on the meaning of today and the significance of this memorial, I want to leave you with a quote from General Colin Powell, who said of America's veterans, "The nation is what it is today because of the efforts and sacrifices of its veterans. Our sons and daughters must understand that the veterans we remember and honor today are the embodiment of the spirit which has guided our nation for over 200 years. On this Veterans Day, as we remember the service and sacrifices of those who fought in Vietnam, we also remember that freedom comes at a cost, and that the Vietnam War and the veterans that served in it must never be forgotten. Thank you for joining us today."
I want to note that Superintendent Reinbold is retiring at the end of the month after 30 years of public service. Thank you, Superintendent Reinbold. And we wish you all the best as you assume your new role with the National Park Foundation. Today, as we commemorate the 40th anniversary of the three Servicemen statue and the 20th anniversary of the In Memory plaque, I want to talk about the importance of each of these parts of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial site. Many visitors to the wall don't realize that the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Site includes multiple memorials. The wall behind me, dedicated in 1982, the 3 Servicemen statue, dedicated in 1984, the Vietnam Women's Memorial, added in 1993, and the in-memory plaque dedicated in 2004 as the final component of the memorial site. Each piece is an important part of the memorial site and of the Vietnam veteran story. The wall was built to honor all those who served in Vietnam, with the names of those who died there and remain unaccounted for being inscribed on the wall. The 3 Servicemen statue was added to the site to provide a heroic, traditional depiction of those who served in Vietnam. The sculptor, the late Frederick Hart, once said, "You are supposed to see 3 soldiers, but there are lots of things I want you to feel as well. I want you to see that these are very young people. I want you to feel that they bore an excruciating burden." In creating the statue, his wife Lindy said he wanted the details of the sculpture to tell the story of a particular time and place. But more importantly, he sculpted every detail, every fold in the fatigues, every tensed muscle, every throbbing vein, in tribute to the veterans who served and sacrificed. And I think we would all agree that the 3 Servicemen statue has stood the test of time. Over the last 40 years, it has continued to be a powerful tribute honoring our Vietnam veterans. In late 1984, Diane Carlson Evans, a nurse who served in the Army in Vietnam and someone I'm sure is watching us at home today, conceived of the idea to add a statue to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Site to honor the women who served. There are 8 women, old nurses, whose names appear on the wall. Of the 265,000 women who served during Vietnam, nearly 10,000 military women served in country during the war. Barred from combat, these women served in healthcare, communications, intelligence, administration, logistics, air traffic control, lots of other fields. The sculpture portrays 3 women, one of whom is caring for a wounded male soldier. In the surrounding plaza, 8 yellowwood trees were planted to symbolize the 8 women whose names are on the wall. The Vietnam Women's Memorial was dedicated in 1993. When the wall was built, no one knew that Vietnam veterans were going to continue dying because of their service. Yet veterans have continued to suffer from Agent Orange-related illnesses and post-traumatic stress disorder, which is why the in-memory plaque is such an important component of this memorial site. The effort to establish the plaque was really led by one person, the late Ruth Coder Fitzgerald. Her brother John had served in Vietnam, returned home, and died of cancer in 1992. She made it her mission to add a plaque to this site that would honor veterans like her brother. After many years of effort and support from the Vietnam Veterans of America and many others, Congress agreed and the in-memory plaque was dedicated in 2004. AVVA, the Associates of the Vietnam Veterans of America, and the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, both nonprofits with no federal funding, worked together for several years to have a plaque installed that is raised and angled toward the visitor, making it more prominent. That new and improved plaque was rededicated in 2019. Beyond the plaque, the in-memory program honors those who served, returned home, and have since died. This past June, we added 656 Vietnam veterans to our in-memory honor roll, the most we've ever added in a single year. Eventually, the in-memory plaque will mark the service of many times more Vietnam veterans than we could possibly list on this wall. Our annual in-memory ceremony includes a reading of the names of the new honorees for that year, here in the place that our nation has set aside for Vietnam veterans. How many of you here have lost a family member, related to their service in Vietnam, or lost a buddy, or know a family who has lost their Vietnam veteran. I encourage each of you to reach out to those families and tell them about this program so that they can identify their loved ones to us to be added to our In Memory Honor Roll. Next, we always are happy to invite a speaker on behalf of the Vietnam Women's Memorial to join us for these ceremonies. Today's speaker is Ruby Schuing. She was born and raised in Illinois, and after attending nursing school, she decided to serve her country. After training in Texas, she went to Vietnam and was stationed at the 18th Surgical Hospital in Pleiku in the post-op area. She fulfilled her commitment in October 1968 and returned to the United States. She and her husband, Gary, settled in Wisconsin. She is an active volunteer with veterans programs, including the Stars and Stripes Honor Flight. Her husband was added to our In Memory program in 2017, and she is also profiled in a unique exhibit called I Am Not Invisible that profiles women veterans. Please welcome Ruby Schuing.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the National Park Service for giving me this opportunity. I am humbled to be here today to be a part of the celebration of the 31st dedication of the Vietnam Women's Memorial. I salute Diane Carlson Evans and say thank you, Diane, for your service. Thank you for your 10-year commitment to say, yes, women did serve in Vietnam, and to make sure, with her fights, to have the Women's Memorial on the Mall and dedicated on Veterans Day. Thank you very much, Diane. Her passion was to have this memorial to serve those 10,000 women who served in Vietnam, military and civilian. So I thank you, Diane. What the wall means to me is just finding out more about other veteran groups and serving them. I started with getting to know more veterans, going out to the schools to educate our kids to let them know that, yes, women served in Vietnam also. I had the opportunity for several years to go to my grandson's school. I went for his elementary and his middle school to be a part of their Veterans Day programs. What an honor. My daughter was one who carried on the I Am Not Invisible in Milwaukee. It was a traveling exhibit, large banners with our pictures and our bios. It was much of an honor to be a part of this. We traveled to municipal buildings. We went to schools, we went to libraries, and I was honored when one of my granddaughters wanted the exhibit to come to her all-girls Catholic high school. What an honor. The exhibit was displayed in their cafeteria for a week, and the other students would come and read the stories about the women who served. These were women who served during World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and the Gulf Wars. This exhibit also traveled to a Milwaukee Bucks game, a Milwaukee Brewers game, and of course to Green Bay for the Green Bay Packers. As Jim has said, we also celebrate the 40th anniversary of the 3 servicemen. We must never forget. We also, my husband was a part, as Jim mentioned, of the In Memory. This was in 2017. My 3 children and I came to the mall, and we, on Father's Day, accepted him into the In Memory program. This year, 3 veterans from the Wisconsin Vietnam Veterans, Chapter 1 in Milwaukee, were brought the pictures, their names, by one of my good friends. And their names, and she stood on the stage and introduce them, and their names were inducted into the In Memory program. What an honor. She brought her dad and 2 other veterans from Wisconsin. Both of them served their country well, and they were also serving their community well. As we mentioned, we'll never forget the 58,749 veterans on the wall, to include the 8 nurses, and never forget POWs, MIAs, and their families, for those that never came home. In the event that they do come back, we have on the wall a designation that a star is changed to a cross to let you know they're welcomed home. I want to thank all of you for coming, especially my children, my 6 grandchildren, my sister, family, friends, and of course, all of you veterans out there. Thank you very much for your service and your sacrifice, and may God bless America.
Thank you, Ruby. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, we have a special presentation. And I want to start by reading a passage from congressional testimony given many years ago by Imogene Cupp, legislative chairwoman from the American Gold Star Mothers, for consideration of the award of the Congressional Gold Medal to Jan Scruggs, Bob Dubeck, and Jack Wheeler, together known and recognized as the co-founders of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Quote, "The creation of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial was an extraordinary achievement. It was dedicated just 3.5 years after the incorporation of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund as a private nonprofit corporation. VVMF was granted a 2-acre site at the most prominent location of the nation's capital and conducted the largest design competition ever held in the United States at the time. It raised over $9 million from the American people. No government funds were appropriated. While caring, Americans helped create the memorial. 3 men, Jan Scruggs, Robert Dubeck, and John Wheeler, were indispensable. In their early, constant, and total dedication to the cause, these 3 stood head and shoulders above all others. Jan Scruggs, a wounded and dedicated former infantryman, conceived of the idea of the memorial and founded the VVMF. He has continually served as its president. From the beginning, he worked tirelessly to promote the idea of the memorial. He enlisted the support of congressmen and government officials. He secured many major contributions. Robert Dubeck, an attorney, became the first full-time employee of the fledgling VVMF organization at half his previous salary. He successfully transformed VVMF from an idea to a movement. Bob coordinated passage of the authorized legislation and initiated the direct mail fundraising campaign. As project director, he directed the design competition, superintended the federal approval of the design, and organized the design and construction team. And he oversaw the timely completion of the memorial. Bob was personally responsible for verifying the completeness and accuracy of the names inscribed on the wall. He was the workhorse of the effort. John Wheeler, chairman of the VVMF's board of directors, volunteered thousands of hours on the project and recruited many other volunteers who have served as directors and advisors. His adept political and managerial decisions were crucial. For Jack, the personal burden of the project included facing raw anger and attempts at intimidation from opponents of the design. Jack has been the Memorial Fund's spiritual leader and has always ensured that the spirit of reconciliation of the nation was not lost amid the rancor of the moment, unquote. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial is truly a contribution to the history of our country. We presented Jan Scruggs with the VVMF Lifetime Service Award in 2022. And today it is my privilege to present this award to Bob Dubeck and the family of the late John Wheeler, which will be accepted by his son John. And I've asked longtime VVMF board member, Mr. John Woods, to help me to present the medals. So Bob and John, would you please join me on stage? John? Are you giving it to John? There we go. Just hold this up this way. There we go. All right, thank you. Bob, if I may.
Yes,
I'm going to do this and try not to poke you in the eye.
that's good. I need my eyes. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Congrats, John.
Come on in here,
Hey, buddy.
John. A little closer here.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much.
And Bob, you can stay up.
Well, I need my speech.
We'll go get that, please. Mr. Woods, Bob and John, thank you for being here today and allowing us to honor your service. Are they bringing it to you?
No, it's under my. Yes. There you go.
There we go.
Obviously, you can't do without this.
Yes. Besides his role in founding the memorial, Bob is often seen here at the wall, wearing his yellow hat as a volunteer, continuing to serve his fellow Vietnam veterans and visitors to the wall. Ladies and gentlemen, your keynote speaker for today, Mr. Bob Dubeck. This is yours too.
Thank you, Jim. Fellow veterans, Gold Star family members, and friends, good afternoon. I'm honored to speak today, yet in recalling the deeds of past speakers, I'm humbled, since my own military service pales in comparison. Nonetheless, I'm proud to be a Vietnam veteran, and I value the bond with my fellow veterans. Here in Washington, a lot of people talk about a lot of things, but I'm going to talk about something about which I really know, which is the history and the living legacy of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. I was here at the beginning, and it's been part of my life now for more than 45 years. In the course of its existence, the memorial has become an American cultural icon. The wall, as it is known, is one of the most revered and heavily visited monuments in our country, with millions of visitors annually. But it came close to not happening at all. Right before the dedication in November 1982, a Washington Post reporter wrote, "It is in keeping with the character of the Vietnam War that the memorial it begat has been the center of an emotional debate about aesthetics and artistic renditions of war, patriotism, and heroics." The war indeed had divided our nation, and Vietnam veterans, as living symbols of the trauma, were ignored or rejected. The effort for the memorial began in 1979 with a vision based upon humanistic values to heal the veterans and to reconcile the country after the war. The man who sparked this effort was Jan Scruggs, who had been wounded in combat, and later whose academic research had verified that how the country's rejection had harmed the veterans. With me and other former junior officers and enlisted men, he formed a private nonprofit corporation to realize the project. The purpose was straightforward: a symbol to honor and recognize all who served, with a special tribute in stone to those who did not return. The recognition would help serve to heal wounded souls, and perhaps both supporters and opponents of the war could agree that the veterans had served honorably. We resolved to honor two basic principles. First, the memorial will be paid for by private donations, so that truly be an expression of the American people. Secondly, it could not make a political statement about the war. We envisioned a veterans memorial, not a war memorial. We started with no money, but the effort was blessed. 2 United States senators shared our passion. Charles Mathias of Maryland introduced the legislation that was needed to build a memorial here on federal land. And Senator John Warner of Virginia obtained the seed money to launch our fundraising campaign. To obtain a design, we held a competition open to any U.S. citizen over 18 years of age, whether amateur or professional. This was not only fair, but for all we knew, there could be someone out there who was predestined to design it. And for the design, we set 4 basic criteria. First, of course, it could not make a political statement about the war. Secondly, it had to have the inscription of the names of the 58,000 dead and missing. Third, it would be harmonious with its site and environment. And finally, it should be reflective and contemplative in character, to focus on the sacrifice. For the jury, we selected distinguished and experienced prestigious artists and designers, as their reputations were important to attract the best entries and to minimize second guessing by the federal agencies that had to approve the design. We received 1,421 entries in the competition, and to display them, we did in an aircraft hangar at Andrews Air Force Base. In May 1981, after viewing all the entries, the jury unanimously chose a stark, simple design submitted by a 21-year-old student named Maya Lin, who happened to be of Chinese descent. Now, we had expected any opposition to the memorial to come from the anti-war elements of American society, yet it came mostly from supporters of the war, including powerful and influential individuals. They appear to have envisioned the memorial as a vehicle to celebrate heroism, the battles won, and the war's noble intentions. Thusly, they saw the winning design as a betrayal. They characterized it as a, quote, black gash of shame, unquote. Indeed, it receded into the ground and constituted a space for contemplation rather than a monument to military achievement. A huge public controversy erupted over the design. It touched on unresolved questions, such as whether the war itself was right or wrong, whether the veterans and dead nonetheless could be honored, and whether a memorial had to be realistic or could be abstract, allowing a visitor's own interpretation. Also, was it appropriate for a person of Asian descent to design a memorial to honor veterans who'd fought against Asians? At one point, the Secretary of the Interior was prepared to reject the design summarily, but we managed to pull it back from the brink, largely due to the brilliant strategic leadership of Jack Wheeler, who served as our chairman, and with the strong support of some retired senior commanders such as General George Price. One of the keys to resolving the controversy with the addition of the 3 servicemen statue, which was dedicated 40 years ago today. The sculptor, Frederick Hart, vividly depicted the strength as well as the youth, innocence, and vulnerability of the common fighting men, underscoring the poignancy of their sacrifice. But the magic of the wall is not the story of its creation or its architectural design. The magic of the wall has been its effect on the soul of our nation. During and after the war, our country seemed to have lost its bearings with regard to honoring the courage, sacrifice, and devotion to duty and country of those who render military service. Often met with hostility or indifference, it was hard for many veterans to find their place in society again. An op-ed in 1978 summed up this effect to quote, "There was probably as much heroism by American servicemen in Vietnam as in any previous war. Yet the Vietnam veteran doesn't know whether he is a hero, an honorable man for serving his country, or a fool for not evading the draft," end quote. But the memorial changed that. At the ceremony for its 25th anniversary in 2007, General Colin Powell, who is previously quoted today, explained, quote, "The wall came at a time when we desperately needed something to heal a nation that had been deeply wounded by Vietnam and other traumatic events of the 1960s and 1970s. He added that it occupies a, quote, "wonderful, remarkable place in America's collective heart," end quote. The memorial's impact is best shown by how visitors comport themselves here. It's a sacred place of remembrance and homage with an atmosphere of reverence. People make pilgrimage and perform acts of commemoration, interacting with the memorial by touching the names and making rubbings of them, and by leaving meaningful items. These are things that people do at sacred places. Most of us have seen the annual Memorial Day motorcycle run to the wall with tens of thousands of bikes. While we can't say this is quiet and reverential, what is it other than a pilgrimage? And perhaps the wall's most positive impact have been veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. A VA expert on PTSD often brought veterans to the wall for therapeutic purposes. And then the individuality It looks like we've had a flyover. Then the individuality of each person named is emphasized by the name's location in the chronological order of its state of casualty, which location can evoke personal and specific memories of time and place, especially among veterans who may have served with that man or woman. And a unique phenomenon is a stream of tokens of love, remembrance, and life that have been left since the dedication. The majority have been small personal items such as letters, photos, and even teddy bears. But there was also a Harley motorcycle custom built by Wisconsin veterans. And the unheralded stewards of the memorial's living legacy, along with the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, are the volunteer guides identified by their yellow caps, and who are on station in all kinds of weather to explain the memorial and assist visitors in finding names. Some have served for decades. The wall's impact has reached far beyond Washington. Beginning in 1984, replicas of the memorial, now numbering at least 5, have toured the country and displayed in thousands of cities and towns. Moreover, permanent replicas have been built around the country. The wall has not only reached far beyond Washington, but far beyond the Vietnam generation. Despite concern about the conflicts in the Middle East, our society has demonstrated universal respect for those who serve there. To our credit, our country has learned to separate the war from the warrior, the warrior from the war. And I have no doubt that this cultural shift has been substantially wrought by the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. It has been a powerful teacher to our nation that it owes a debt of gratitude to those who serve in harm's way, and especially those who make the ultimate sacrifice. As General Powell said in 2007, quote, "There is magic in this wall that has stood for 25 years," end quote. And I submit that the magic remains today. Again, I thank you all for coming, and I've been honored to speak here today.
Thank you, Bob. We're going to do something a little bit different here today in this part of the ceremony. We actually have a medical condition taking place over to my right, and a stretcher will be coming in here in just a moment. So I would ask you all to please remain in your seats for just a moment while we're able to provide some aid to this person. I think they're going to provide that aid while we continue with the next part of the ceremony. Thanks to our first responders for being here. We appreciate it. And now I would ask the representatives who will be involved in the wreath laying to take your places, please. These are representatives of several of our nation's leading veteran service organizations. And for many years, these veteran service organizations have joined our tradition of laying wreaths here at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in honor of all those who've served and sacrificed. While the wreath layers get into position, I'd like to share a few highlights of what's been a very busy year for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Our traveling exhibit called The Wall That Heals is wrapping up a fantastic 2024 tour this week at our final stop in Florida. We started our 2024 season in Hawaii, if you can believe it, bringing the wall to more than 30,000 visitors who may have never had the opportunity to make it here to Washington, D.C. During the next 30 weeks, nearly 200,000 visitors joined us in another 20 states from coast to coast. More communities than ever before applied to host the exhibit in 2025, and next week we'll announce the schedule for next year's tour of The Wall That Heals. We hope that we'll see you as we bring the healing and educational nature of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial to your local community. We're particularly proud of this exhibit as it travels around the country, and as I feel, we're bringing the names home to the communities from where they came. Our podcast, which is called Echoes of the Vietnam War, is nearing 100 episodes, and if you haven't listened to it, you really should. It features compelling stories of service and sacrifice from veterans and their families. Many of the people in today's audience have been featured on past episodes, and we're always looking for new story ideas. You can go to our website at vvmf.org/echoes to listen. Before we begin the wreath laying, I want to point out that in spring 2025, we will commemorate the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. While the fall of Saigon was April 29, 1975, the final names on the wall are from May 15, 1975. So we'll use our ceremony on Memorial Day next year to commemorate the end of the war and to remember all 58,281 who lost their lives in the Vietnam War. We're also extending an invitation to all Vietnam veterans and their families, and we want the Vietnamese veterans, those who served alongside us, who later found their way to our country. We want you to know that you and your families are invited as well. You always are welcome here at the memorial, and we want you to be here on Memorial Day to mark this historic milestone. On to our wreath laying. I will now read the names of the organizations as they lay their wreaths. While the wreaths are being laid, you will hear bagpiper Chris Jackson playing Amazing Grace. Today's ceremony will close with the playing of taps by Sergeant First Class Adrian Doctor of the U.S. Army Band. If everyone could please stand as you are able. National Park Service. Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Vietnam Women's Memorial. American Gold Star Mothers Incorporated. Gold Star Wives of America. Sons and Daughters in Touch. 1st Cavalry Division. A6 Intruder Association. 5th Battalion, 7th Cavalry Association. Disabled American Veterans. (8 o'clock to 9 o'clock) PTSD class, Washington. Jewish War Veterans of the USA. (28th Infantry Regiment Association). U.S. Army AmeriCal Division. Volunteers of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Vietnam Veterans of America. The American Legion. Associates of the Vietnam Veterans of America. Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States. Military Order of the Purple Heart. Quezon Veterans. Task Force 3rd Battalion, 506 Airborne Infantry Association. AMVETS. Paralyzed Veterans of America. National Dusters, Quads, and Searchlights Association. Verizon Veterans. U.S. Army OCS Alumni Association. And all other organizations that are here with us today. Please remain standing until taps has been played. Please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our ceremony. However, I would ask you all to remain in your seats for just a couple of more moments until our first responders can depart.